On April 20th, 1999, Marvin R. Shanken had the rare privilege of interviewing Ernest Gallo, then chairman of the largest winery in the world, E&J Gallo Winery, on the occasion of his 90th birthday. A legend and visionary in the U.S. wine business, Ernest, with his brother Julio, began producing wine after the repeal of Prohibition in 1933. Near the end of their leadership, the company they built marketed 40 brands with sales of 75 million cases and revenues of $1.5 billion. Since this interview took place, the E&J Gallo brand portfolio has grown to 130-plus brands with sales of 100 million cases and estimated revenues of $4 billion in 2020. The company today has 7,000 employees and markets its brands in 100 countries. Ernest was notoriously private and publicity shy, so it was a great honor when he agreed to be interviewed, and then agreed the interview could be videotaped. But it almost didn't happen, as Marvin Shanken explained in 2008 at a company gathering in Las Vegas to celebrate the E&J Gallo Winery's 75th anniversary.
A most memorable moment actually preceded the interview that I'll never forget and want to share with you this morning. I flew to Modesto for the interview and was to meet Ernest at his office so that we could then take his helicopter to Sonoma to tour the new winery in Healdsburg, have lunch, and then return back to Modesto for the sit-down interview the next day. I could not believe that he was going through with the taping. He trusted me, or otherwise he would never have allowed me to do this. So I arrive at the Gallo Winery in Modesto. I'm standing in the reception area on the lobby floor, and the receptionist calls up to his office. Soon Ernest comes slowly walking down the stairs. There's a man following him that I don't know. Ernest is in very casual clothes with a light windbreaker jacket on. He hands me a document that looks like a legal agreement. And I say, Ernest, what's this? And he says, read it. You need to sign it. I need to sign it? What is it? He said, well, take a look at it, but you need to sign it. So I read it. It's a lengthy confidentiality letter, which basically says that I can't publicize the video, and if I breach the contract, I have to pay his son Joe Gallo $1 million penalty. An agreement which, by the way, Joe didn't know anything about. I look at the document, read it, and said, Ernest, I won't sign it. You obviously don't trust me. I'm going back to New York. Ernest then paused. He then turned around, gave the document to the lawyer, who was standing there, and said, I told you this was a dumb idea. Now get the hell out of here. He turned back, grabbed my arm, and said, let's go. That was the last time we ever discussed the legal agreement. First of all, happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
It's quite remarkable that you're celebrating your 90th birthday and looking back on all your accomplishments. I wanted to start off by asking you your first memories, your first recollections of drinking wine. Do you remember when you first had wine?
Yes, I do. I was 5 years old, living with my grandfather and grandmother. It was during the vintage season. My grandfather had a 20-acre vineyard out near Hanford, California. He had a small, what he called winery, in the backyard. A shed about the size of a normal room. Had a small tank in there, a wine press. In fact, it's one of my first memories. I still can see today 2 men there on the bar of the press, pressing that wine, and they'd stop and rest a while the juice ran out the bottom, Had a tin cup. They used to take it and fill the tin cup, take a sip, put it down, rest a while, and then go at pressing again.
Do you remember what kind of wine it was?
The red wine.
And did you like drinking it?
Well, when I saw them doing this, as a child, I also took the cup, went there and got some of that pressed wine and tasted it. It tasted very good. It was slightly sweet. And I still can remember it to this day. These two guys laughing. For some reason, they're really laughing. Next thing I remember, I woke up in my grandmother's bed. It was my first and last drunk.
Before 1933, when the Prohibition was repealed, did you spend much time in the wine business? Was that you were growing up, you were a teenager. What did wine mean to you growing up?
During a teenager,
Yeah.
this was during Prohibition, a family was permitted to make 200 gallons of wine for their own use. And so my father used to make a barrel or two of wine every year. So we used to help him. Those days what you did, you put the grapes in a tub and with your bare feet squeezed it, pressed it. And that was the extent of our experience, that is my brother and I. He and I worked in the vineyards. We worked in the vineyards until the repeal of Prohibition.
Were you waiting for the end of Prohibition to start your company? I mean, you and your brother working together, was it always your adult idea, dream to start a wine company?
I should say a year or two before Prohibition was repealed, starting about 1930, we did start thinking that if the law would change, that we'd like to get involved in the wine business.
In the early days, what kind of dreams did you have?
I really can't describe them as dreams. The last 2 or 3 years of Prohibition, my father sent me to Chicago, sell our grape on track to home winemakers, and also Julio. What happened in 1932, there was an overproduction and a disastrous market. My father lost very heavily. In fact, most shippers lost everything they had. And my father passed away in May of '33. Prohibition had been announced would be repealed in December 5th of '33. But my father left these small vineyards hopelessly in debt. Like everyone else, we were on the verge of losing them. So we decided that, and at that time, the price of grapes was only $8 a ton. That would not have made enough money to pay off the debts that my father owed. But we thought that by going to the wine business, taking the crop, converting it into wine, when the law permitted, we probably could get enough to save the property. And that's what we did.
How long did you struggle in the beginning before you realized that you were building a successful company with a long life?
From the day we went into the wine business, we never thought that there's any such thing as failing. It's just another day's work.
How did it come about that Julio was in charge of production and you were in charge of sales and marketing.
Julio always preferred gardening, raising things, being in the field, and he naturally gravitated towards planting vineyards and taking care of them. I, on the other hand, gravitated towards getting to know the retailer, getting to understand marketing, and spent my time doing that.
You make it sound very simple. Many people consider you the father of the modern wine industry. From a sales and marketing standpoint, you were clearly a giant and a leader ahead of your time. Yet you've had no formal training. How did you develop the expertise in sales and marketing without having gotten it from a book or from a job or what have? How does one do this?
In the first place, I think it's an overstatement to say that whatever word you used with reference to me. Fact is that when we made the wine, then of course the next thing was to sell it. It was only a matter of common sense as far as I was concerned. You go and call on a retailer, look your shop over, and talk to him. From that, decide what would make good common sense to get him to buy my product. It was obvious that you should have it. First of all, in those days, 1933 and 34, there was very little advertising, and the consumer depended upon the recommendation of the retailer. But the retailer had hundreds of brands, and it was impractical for me to expect him to recommend my brand. But it didn't take much to reason that if I could get the best spot in the store with my product, that in effect was a silent recommendation of the retailer. So we struggled and planned how to get a good spot on the shelf and also on the floor.
There's a story that goes around that I'm not even sure if it's true. You can tell me, but everybody laughs when they hear it, and that is that Julio always wanted to make more wine than you could sell, and you wanted to sell more wine than he could make. Is this a true story, or is this a...
We kidded a lot about that. We felt that every year we wanted to sell more wine. And that meant making better wine, constantly better. And with that, we did increase our volume continually and expanded our distribution.
In an article in 1986 in the Wine Spectator, someone said, "There's almost a feeling of immortality about Ernest. Nothing stands in his way." You're 90 years old. In recent years, you've lost Amelia, David, Julio. How do you feel about your mortality?
Well, it's tragic. They're all such great people. Also unfair that they had to leave when they did. Julio felt for years grapes and wine produced in Sonoma were the best in California. I think we have proven him right. And he did a lot to help the winery establish itself here. In fact, he was the motivating factor. If you were here today, you'd have a great satisfaction in what has been achieved by the third generation.
I remember after tasting one day, he said, "Gina, if you ever feel like you've mastered the art of winemaking, it's time to hand over the baton. And at the time, I'm still young, but I didn't understand where he was going with that statement. And now it's completely clear, that's the beauty of winemaking, is you never master it. And he truly believed that, and I think that's why he was such an incredible winemaker.
He gave us what we have today, along with Ernest, and we're here continuing on their dreams and vision, their hard work.
In another interview, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, when we talked about the future of Gallo and Sonoma, you said to me, "It's the last mountain to climb." Remember that?
Yes, I do.
Are you at the top of the mountain?
No.
Why not?
We've got still so much to do.
Look at what you've accomplished with the help of your family, your friends, your employees. It is almost beyond comprehension what you've achieved, the enormous and positive reviews that you've gotten from all press regarding the quality of your wines. Maybe there are little wineries that can come out with a few wines and get high scores, but you've already received in the first few years, I think the last time I counted 19, and it increases every day, scores of 90 above, outstanding classic. And yet you're not satisfied. Even when we walked around and tasted wine, there wasn't one wine you were happy with. You found a fault with every wine. Is that a good trait or a bad trait?
You may be a better judge of whether that's a good trait or not. Either proper or improperly. I've always striven and tried to get my people to strive for perfection. In anything they do, we never achieve it. But by trying, we generally improve.
So there has never been a moment in your life when you've taken a deep breath and said, "I've done it."
I've never did anything that came close to being perfect.
I'm reminded that at the end of many hours of taping, Ernest hosted a dinner at his home for me. In attendance was Joe Gallo, Bob Gallo, Jim Coleman, and Ernest J. Gallo. During dinner, after a few glasses of wine, I became lightheaded. I felt faint and told Ernest. Ernest quickly got up, grabbed my arm, and said, "Come with me." Ignoring my protests, he took me to the Modesto hospital. It had to be about 10 o'clock at night, already past his bedtime. We walked into the Modesto hospital emergency room, and it was like the Red Sea had parted. He went up to the receptionist and said, "I need to see a doctor right away." She said, "Yes, Mr. Gallo." And within 4 seconds, a doctor came running out and took me and Ernest into a private examination room. The doctor asked a lot of questions and basically said that I was fine, but I should rest for a few hours. By this time, it's after midnight. Picture this. I'm lying in a hospital bed. Ernest is sitting in a chair by my side, taking care of me. I look at Ernest, who is 90 years old, and I say, "Ernest, what's wrong with this picture?" We both burst out laughing. It was an unforgettable night. He was taking care of me. That's Ernest. What are your important concerns today?
What bothers me is that our industry has not achieved the status, standing of its potential, of what it really deserves.
In terms of the size of the market, in terms of the number of drinkers?
In all those, I think that there's considerable room for making a product that is more generally accepted than it is. What we make is considered very good. In fact, we think there in Sonoma we make probably the best wines in the world. But still, that's judged by what you'd call responsible wine drinkers, experienced wine drinkers. But we think the market potential is much larger than that. And we should have something that would appeal to a broader spectrum than what we have today. That not only goes for us, but for the industry.
What do you think of the future for California wines outside the United States, around the world?
I wish that we would have a level playing field. I'd like to see an equalization of the tariffs. In every country outside of the United States, the tariffs are much higher than the tariffs of wine coming into the United States. If those tariffs were harmonized with ours, I think we'd have a great opportunity because of the quality of our products.
Have you slowed down much in recent years?
What do you mean by slowing down?
Well, what is a typical day?
Get up in the morning,
What time do you wake up in the morning?
7 o'clock,
And then what's your day like?
and I go out and exercise. I walk during weekdays, briskly walk a half hour. Saturdays and Sundays, I'll walk an hour. Then I'll have a breakfast. And during weekdays, go to the office, work through lunch, leave the office around 6:30, come home, have dinner. After dinner, put in about 3 hours homework that I bring from the office. Saturdays and Sundays, I'll finish up what I didn't have time to do during the week.
It doesn't sound like you're taking advantage of your old age very much.
I think I am. I think I am.
Is the organization pretty much geared to run without you at this point?
Yes, it certainly is. We have great people, really great people.
So you're comfortable in terms of the future leadership of the company?
Yes, it may be even a better company after I'm gone than it is now.
The California wine industry has had really, in the last 50 years, two leaders, you and Robert Mondavi. Who is going to lead the California wine industry after you and Robert are gone?
A real tough question.
I know how much the California wine industry means to you, and I know how hard you've worked for many, many years trying to change and upgrade a lot of the regulations which have tried to strangulate the wine industry across America with the Wine Institute and other groups. I think that there exists a possibility of a vacuum after the two of you are no longer here. That can be a serious problem.
Not at all.
No?
Not at all. Not only in my organization, but in others. There's some very capable people. Very capable. In some respects, even more than Bob and I. I think that some of them drive this industry far beyond what it is today. No question about it.
How do you tell a stranger about what you've done in Sonoma? How do you describe what you've created there?
I don't try to talk about it. I don't have that talent or ability.
Did you ever have any doubts, any fears that you would be unsuccessful in Sonoma?
Never.
When you started?
Never.
You know, it's in your mind, it was, you were going to do it, you were going to do it right, and it was going to be a success, and there was no compromise, no possibility of failure.
That's absolutely right. Nothing that my brother and I ever undertook that we have the slightest doubt would be successful.
That gene, that attitude, where did you get it? Where did you get such self-confidence that you can do the impossible and do it calmly?
We didn't do the impossible. We did the obvious.
But why was it that you were able to do it and others weren't?
Well, I'm not so sure that others didn't also. In fact, I'm sure they have. There's many people in the wine business that started with handicaps, I got to believe, equal to ours, if not greater, and have done extremely well, and they deserve an enormous amount of credit.
One day in early 1983, George Frank called me and said he didn't know how or why, but the Gallo brothers have agreed to be honored and receive the Wine Spectator's Distinguished Service Award at the California Wine Experience. It was to be held at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. When he told me this, I could not believe my ears and asked him to repeat what he had just said. Later that year in October, we held the California Wine Experience weekend. The Distinguished Service Award was to be given out at the Saturday night black tie banquet. The cocktail party was to begin at 7 and dinner at 8. There was electricity in the air all weekend. Maybe some of you in this room today were there. At about 5:30, George Frank came up to me with a dumbfounded look on his face and said, "Ernest and Julio are up in their room at the hotel. They've changed their minds and are not coming down." I can't tell you how devastated I was. I turned to George and I said, "Are you kidding? Over 1,000 people are coming to the banquet tonight, expecting them to be there." I said, "You go up there and tell Ernest and Julio they have to come down." George sheepishly said, "I'll try, but I can't promise you. I have no idea why they changed their minds." And for the next 2 hours, I heard nothing and feared the worst. Later, I was at the cocktail party greeting people with a smile on my face, but inside I was dying. Towards the end of the cocktail party, I saw Ernest, Julio, Amelia, and Eileen walk in. I can't believe to explain the relief I felt. What you won't see in the next video from that night is that after I finished my remarks, presenting them with their Distinguished Service Award, they stayed seated in their chairs. I'm holding the plaque. They're supposed to come up to the podium to say a few words, and then I present them with the award. There was a long, long pause. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I say, "Ernest, Julio, if you want the plaque, you got to come up here and get it, because I ain't bringing it to the table." And everybody started to laugh. They again paused and then got up from their chairs and walked up to the podium. And now, let me play a few moments from the memorable evening 25 years ago.
It is with enormous pride that we present the Wine Spectator's 1983 Distinguished Service Award to Ernest and Julio Gallo.
Never in my life have I seen such justice done for two brothers who just have done something unique in the history of the world.
But I like to look upon it as a tribute to an outstanding production staff, many of them who've been with our company for over 25 years, dedicated to the production of quality wine. We are lucky as young men. We were grape growers at the time Prohibition was repealed. We were lucky that we both felt that the wine business was a natural extension of growing grapes. And we're both lucky that we have fine and remarkable wives. Therefore, with so much luck, we had very little to do with it. Thank you.
Will this portion of your business ever become the largest part of your business, the fine wine business?
It'll become the largest part of our wine business, but we're in other things, as you know, like in brandy and liqueur and carbonated wine, which are units in themselves. As far as table wine's concerned, it's going to become very significant. I'm not going to say it's necessarily the biggest, because there are other areas in the table wine business that have great potential in the way of new products.
But do you rule out the possibility of going to other fine wine regions of California in the future?
Not at all. Not at all.
I know that you've been buying grapes from the Fry Brother Winery back to the 30s, and that I'm told that you started buying an interest in the winery in 1970, and I guess formal ownership of your first vineyard in Sonoma was 1977. But at what time before or after 1977 did you and he agree that this is the next chapter in our company's book?
It must have been around that time. It's something that we felt would happen as the opportunity developed.
You used to tout Gallo's Hardy Burgundy over First Growth Bordeaux. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now that you're in the premium end of the wine business, have your taste changed?
I haven't tasted First Growth Bordeaux in years.
Tell me about your new campaign, where for the first time you're using younger family members.
Well, the third generation has become increasingly active and responsible for our winemaking, our grape growing, and now even in our sales. And I think it's proper and timely for us to recognize that.
You have 15 grandchildren, you and Julio. I was told, I think, of which 12 are in the company today.
I haven't counted, but something like that.
I imagine that pleases you very much.
Yes, it certainly does. There's quite a few of my brother's grandchildren in the business.
And they're smart kids too. They're hardworking kids, and
I assume, being 90 years of age, I can be objective. Yes, I think they are.
Ernest was in some ways very predictable, in other ways not at all. Among the many episodes of friendship we shared, I always had to be prepared for the unexpected. Like one time in the 1980s, when I was on Christmas vacation with my wife in the Caribbean. We were at a remote beach resort on the island of St. Martin. I'll never forget it. It was Sunday morning at around 9 a.m. There was a knock at our door. Who can that be? I asked Hazel. No one knows we're here, so I thought. I opened the door, and it's Ernest Gallo and Albion Fenderson. And I think Albion's in the room, and he's probably smiling. They were in bathing suits and T-shirts. Ernest said, we were on a yacht in the area fishing and thought it would be a nice idea to stop by for a visit. Ernest then invited me to take a walk with him on the beach. Why was he there? I soon found out. He wasn't happy with a rating Wine Spectator given one of his wines. I swear to God. Trust me, this conversation was not the highlight of my vacation. But the conversation was frank, and I think when it was over, he knew me a little better, and we ended up having much greater mutual respect. It once again shows the extent to which Ernest pursued what mattered to him. There was no limit, a lesson for all of us.
You're sitting here in this barrel room, you know, that has been part of a dream for many, many years. You know, you're sitting with, you know, your family. Are you satisfied?
Am I satisfied? Well, let me put it this way. What the third generation has accomplished up to this point is fantastic. Great.
You have always personally paid a lot of attention to your diet, to exercise, and to drinking wine every day of your life. Do you believe that this program and the role of wine is one of the main reasons that you not only live to 90, but that you intellectually are as sharp as you were 30 years ago?
Well, I'm not sure. Hard for me to know whether that's correct or not. I do take very good care of myself in that I eat what everybody knows now, a proper diet. As far as wine is concerned, it's true that I drink 2 glasses of wine a day, one for lunch and one for dinner. I read where quite a few research organizations have found, or they state they have found, that wine is good for the heart, extends life, and all things of that type. Whether that's true or not, I don't know enough about it to comment on it. I do know that some people shouldn't be drinking at all.
The landscape of wine in California 50 years ago was Italian Swiss Colony, Roma, Petri. It was a lot of big, strong companies. None of which are in existence anymore. Somehow you did things differently than they did. What was your strength? What was their weakness that they didn't survive? Because they were much larger than you.
Yes, they were. I'd say 2 things. One, I went into retail stores, and 2, we made better wine.
When you said you went into retail stores with that, you're really saying is you wanted to see what consumers were buying, which is what it's all about. Now we're up to the 1980s. What was your reaction when it was announced that Coca-Cola was going into the wine business? Did you ever feel threatened by it?
Not at all. Not at all.
It would seem to me that you had, up until then, eliminated your competition. And now comes along one of the great blue chips of America, Coca-Cola, to be in the wine business. It had to concern you, didn't it?
Well, in the first place, at that time, we did not feel that we eliminated competition. The wine business has been very competitive from the very start. In fact, it's as competitive today, or maybe more so than it has ever been. As far as Coca-Cola is concerned, they, without question, are expert in selling soft drinks. Selling wine is obviously different. All we did when they came in was continue doing what we were doing, but doing it better.
Do you have any regrets? Are there any things in business that you did that you regretted doing and wish you hadn't done?
No.
Or that you didn't do and wish you had?
No.
Do you see per capita consumption of wine in America growing?
It will.
Because?
New products.
In many ways, the videotaping was the ultimate honor for me. It was unconditional trust from a man who didn't easily trust anyone. Let's go back to the video for one last question.
It's 50 years from now. It's 2050. And there's a big fat book. It says Encyclopedia of Wine. And you go to page 172, and it says Ernest Gallo. What would you like it to say?
He was here.
Our friendship.
The friendship.
Passionate about the good life? Join us at Wine Spectator, Whiskey Advocate, and Cigar Aficionado for candid interviews with the world's most fascinating personalities. The inside scoop on fine wines, whiskeys, cigars, golf, fine dining, and travel. All devoted to enhancing your pursuit of life's great pleasures. Every issue includes unbiased ratings and expertise you can trust. Whether you're a connoisseur or a beginner eager to learn, the good life is waiting for you. Join us today. Subscribe to one or all three: Wine Spectator, Whiskey Advocate, and Cigar Aficionado at goodlife.mshanken.com.